There was a very wise Persian king, and he had 4 sons. And he felt as a father and as a king that his most important job was to raise his young men with wisdom, to teach them the good values of the world, but more importantly, that wisdom to make good, solid decisions. And so he called together these 4 kids, and he said, first of all, to his eldest son, he says, I own this tract of land pretty far away, but I want you to go on a journey, and I want you to observe the tree that I planted there, the mango tree. I want you to observe that tree and tell me, is it worth keeping that tree? He said, then I'm going to send your brothers also. So the first son went in the winter, and he saw the tree, and it was nothing but bare, no flowering on the tree whatsoever. It looked very sickly. And so the son said, no question in his mind, tree's got to go. Then the second one went and said, went in the spring, and he saw the same tree, and it began to flower a little bit, enough leaves on it. He began to throw a little bit of shade on the ground. But the son said to his father, he says, if you think that shade is worth it, I guess we could keep the tree going. But it's pretty expensive to keep that tree healthy. I don't know if it's worth it. The third one went again in the summer. And he saw a tree that was really blossoming. Lots of pretty flowers on it. Lots of greenery, lots of shade. And he said, Dad, I said, that's a pretty nice tree now. It'd probably be a good idea to keep it, but if you only come here once in a while, maybe that's too expensive to maintain that tree. Finally, the last one went. He went in the fall, and he saw this tree with beautiful fruit on it, luxurious color to it. It was just the most beautiful tree in the world. And he's, Dad, you got to keep this. He says, it'll make us a lot of money in the marketplace. But no, I think this tree must be maintained no matter what the cost. So the father heard all 4 of these reports, and he was satisfied, and he smiled, and he said, each of you is correct, for each of you saw the tree at a different time. The lesson is clear. If you wish to be wise, you should withhold your judgment until you have seen the tree in all of its seasons. That correlates, I think, beautifully with the gospel today. That Jesus is in the temple. He had just been praying. And he goes to the temple, and he's known for his speaking. So he begins to speak there. And there's people there that are hearing him are just looking for a way to get at him. They didn't want to accept his message. They're looking at ways to get even with Jesus. And so they brought this woman in. I don't know if they really cared that she had done this terrible act of adultery, but it wasn't important to the Jewish people, rather to those leaders. They were using her. And they brought her in, and they humiliated her in front of them. And the question might be asked very legitimately, where was the guy? We don't hear about that, do we? Yeah, something's incomplete in that story. But she's put up there and made to face this crowd, and they ready to end her, to get rid of her. Let's stone her. That's what the law says. And by golly, the leaders, Jewish leaders at the time, it was the law, and so by golly, we're going to do it. And then the context changes a little bit. That Jesus, I think, begins to say, she's the tree that's barren, but a couple months from now, she could become better. And so Jesus, let's not get rid of her so quick. I know what your laws are. I know what's supposed to happen. But by golly, let's give her a chance. Let's see if she can eventually produce some fruit. And that's exactly what happened. Jesus challenges listeners and challenges us to give that woman another chance, to suspend judgment in light of another season which could produce some wonderful fruit. It's also easy in this gospel to think it's all about that woman and about her sin. But actually, there's a whole other dynamic going on between Jesus and his opponents, because they're there to trap him. They're there to trap him. They're not ready about a law. They didn't keep many laws themselves, but they were the proclaimers of the law. And so when they found Jesus there, they said, well, Jesus, according to our law, the Mosaic law, she should be stoned to death. And then we know that the Romans had their laws. And the Romans said the Jews couldn't execute anybody. That was a Roman decision. And so Jesus was put in the middle of this, because if Jesus said, well, okay, let's stone her, he's in trouble with the Romans. If he says, let's not stone her, then he's in trouble with the Jewish leaders. So Jesus does a brilliant thing, a brilliant move. And he turns it all back to the other people, turns it away from the woman. And he sits down there for a few moments. It's one of the neat little parts of that story. He bends down as all these arguments are going on. He starts to write in the ground. Now, there's all kinds of theories as to why he wrote in the ground. Some said that he wrote down the sins of those people that were watching. Kind of embarrassing. Find your name there and the whole list. Oops. And yet that's one theory. Okay, one that I like, and it's probably not a technical theory, but it makes sense to me, is that Jesus bent down and he was doodling. Is it doodles or doodles? Doodles. Yeah. And, he maybe drew some lines and he drew some figures. And you might say, well, what was he doing? He was making time for what he said to sink in. Because he was saying to those people, go ahead and stone her, if you have no sins. Go ahead. Mash her up with stones, but if you have no sins, you be the first to throw them. And so as he's writing, they're thinking of that, and what was I, if I were in her position, what would I want? And so we notice how quietly they begin to leave. They leave. And what needs to be clear here is Jesus isn't saying that her sin wasn't a sin. It was public knowledge. It was a witness to that. And so Jesus knew that, and Jesus wasn't condoning it. But Jesus is a God of second chances. And Jesus wanted and knew that if we put her in another season, she would be different and she would change. And so Jesus gives her that opportunity. And it really becomes then a story of mercy, the mercy of God, that God wants us to start again, to give us another chance, and not to be trapped into the fact that, well, I can't. I've messed up so badly, there's no way I can be returned to fullness with the Lord. So untrue. The Lord is always inviting us to a deeper, more intimate relationship. And so, as we heard there, Jesus, he just says to it very clearly, let anyone here who is without sin be the first to cast a stone at her. He shifts that whole discussion from the woman's sin to our own sin, from strict justice to hope for mercy. And that's really the call of the church, to be a church of mercy. And I love the expression that Pope Francis uses when he says, whenever there are Christians, everyone should find an oasis of mercy. That's the big order. It takes courage to exercise mercy in a society that sees mercy as a weakness. It takes conviction to believe that mercy is a sign of God's goodness and the power of God. And so the gospel today issues a challenge to us. Do we really believe in that mercy of God? And if we do, can we learn to extend that mercy and to bring healing and forgiveness into the lives of those that maybe, if given a chance and enter another season, they may begin to flourish. And that is the hope of God. And so having received that mercy ourselves and forgiveness, how can we choose to judge and condemn others who look towards us for mercy?